Scan Pro Video brings you a series of webinars focusing on the latest Blackmagic design products and information.
Good afternoon, everyone. Great to have you all here. My name's Alistair. I'm a master trainer for DaVinci Resolve. And today we're going to have a quick look at Fusion for editors. Probably give it a minute or two before we jump in, just in case there's any sort of people joining a little bit late. But yeah, I'll just sort of a bit of background really. This sort of webinar that we're doing today, it's not going to be super in depth. You know, we're not teaching you to be you know, compositors down to, you know, the finest detail. We're very much just going through the basics of things that you might need to know as an editor who's looking to be able to do, you know, shot cleanup, quick, you know, pull on a quick key for your green screen footage or anything like that. And how it's, you know, relatively easily done in Fusion without having to round trip really. So probably going to be about an hour, maybe a little bit over. So I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us on this. If there are any questions, throw them in chat. And what we'll do is, as we get to the end of the webinar, I'll bring up the chat window and we'll just sort of go through any sort of questions that you might have. You know, if there's anything I can't answer, I'll then strive to get you an answer outside of the webinar as well. So don't worry that you know, I wish I knew everything about Resolve. It is a massive application. So I might not be able to give you an answer on the spot, but we'll certainly get you an answer to any questions that you do have. So I'll just dive in and I will start sharing my screen here. Here we go. Share sound and move that off to the side there. And I'll just open the chat window and push that off there as well. So the first thing I'm going to do isn't actually Fusion related. This is something that I, when I'm training people in Resolve, this is something that I always tell them to do before anything. And it's a bit of a bugbear of mine. For a little bit of background, I actually worked in the support department for Blackmagic for a while, so I've seen a lot of cases where this this can come in helpful, and it's autosaves. So DaVinci Resolve previously was never set up to autosave by default. And as we all know, you know, it doesn't matter what application you're working in, the worst can happen. You can have a crash. So I always recommend the first thing that you do when you're starting out with DaVinci Resolve, a habit you get into and you make sure you set it up, is by going to the preferences. So if you go to DaVinci Resolve in the top left here and then preferences, or you use Control, comma if you're on a Windows system, or Command, comma if you're on a Mac. So DaVinci Resolve, preferences, and then along the top here we have system and user, and we're just going to go into user. And on the left-hand side, we now have menus for our preferences, and one of these is project save and load. So as you can see here, we have save settings, and we have live save and project backups. Live save will save every keystroke that we do. So in the event of the worst, if the application does crash, it's already saved all of our keystrokes up until the crash happened. We can also turn on project backups if we want. So, you know, you can choose, you know, how often a project backup is created, how many hourly backups you save, and how many, you know, daily backups you save as well. I'm not too worried about the project backups at the moment, but it is handy to know that that is there. I'm just turning on the live save. There's too many instances where, you know, people might not be running it on, you know, the best hardware. It might be like an old GPU or something like that, and it might cause a little bit of instability. And if the application crashes, you don't want to lose any of your work. So I always recommend making sure you've got at least live save turned on, if not also the project backups. So what we've got here in this project is, I'll close this down, is let me in the audio actually. What I've got here is just a little bit of a short film. You know, it's a sort of sci-fi space film, basically. And this is what we're going to be working on, which I think gives us a lot to work with. And you know, we've got quite a few different scenes here, and the first one we're going to look at is actually this this orange one, this pod composition. And I'm going to jump into the Fusion page, and this is, you'll hear me, you know, rave about this before if you've been on any of the previous webinars that we've done with Scan. I love the fact that I can go from editing to Fusion to, you know, color grading to, you know, audio mixing all within an application and not having to round trip. It is a lifesaver. Anyone that spent hours with AEFs and XMLs and relinking, just round tripping in general, is a bit of a nightmare. So the fact that I have it all in one application is just a lifesaver. And I'm just going to go through a quick walkthrough of the user interface, because whilst it might look familiar or feel familiar, say, to the edit page with the two viewers and the section down the bottom, it does function just slightly differently. So we'll start at the top here. We have, in the top left, we have different palettes that we can open. We can open our media pool, so we can import clips directly into our Fusion compositions. We have an effects library where we can go through and look at all the different tools that we want to use. We have a clips button underneath that, and that will just show us all of our clips on the timeline. So, you know, our 7th clip in here is the clip we're on. If we go back to our edit page, you know, we have, excluding the titles, we have 6 clips in front. That's our 7th clip. So really, it's just a handy way to navigate our timeline. You know, if we want to jump to specific clips, we can just do that down there. And then this section here, that's nodes, and that's what we're going to be working on in Fusion quite a lot. It's a node-based compositor. So for those coming from something like After Effects, it might feel a bit different to start with, jumping from layers to nodes. But once you get into it, you know, you'll find it's not as daunting as it might first seem. In the middle of the sort of top of the application here, we have 2 viewers. And now these aren't source and record viewers as you would get in, say, the edit page. These are 2 completely independent viewers, and you can view different nodes on them at any given time. And as we go through, you'll see a bit more of what I mean by that and how we use that. And finally, on the right-hand side, we have the inspector, which is the current open palette, but we also have different palettes for things like metadata, for keyframes, and for splines as well. We're not going to get too into, you know, editing splines or you know, manually adjusting keyframes and all that sort of stuff. We'll do a little bit of keyframing, but not so much that we'll have to jump into the keyframe palette, really. So the main section of your work in Fusion is going to be done in this part here. This is our node graph, or node window, however you want to refer to it. And this is where we build our compositions. So as you'll see, I've just jumped into the Fusion page. And if I jumped into any clip, you'll see it always starts with 2 nodes. And this is our media in node here and our media out node. So really what these nodes do is the media in node loads media from the edit page into the Fusion page. And then the media out node takes our media out of the Fusion page back into the rest of the Resolve application. And anything that we do in between these 2 nodes is how we build up our effects, how we build up our compositions. So what I'm going to do, in fact, I'll show you what I mean about the viewers actually, because this is a little interesting one. Underneath each of these nodes, if I zoom in a little bit, you'll see here, in fact, I will open there we go. Underneath each of these nodes, you'll see I've got 3 dots currently. Now, you might only have 2 dots, and what that shows is the viewers that you have available. Now, I've already said that there's 2 viewers here. Why do I have 3 dots? Well, I have a deck link card in my system. So I have my reference monitor that's connected to my deck link card, and that 3rd dot is for that deck link card. So I can send any nodes straight to the deck link card. And the first 2 dots are my viewers, viewer 1 and viewer 2. So if I drag this node up into viewer 1 and release, you'll see it then loads that clip into the viewer for me. I can also just click on the little dots underneath if I wanted, or I can actually use the numbers 1, 2, and 3. So just by clicking on 1, 2, and 3, I can load you know, a node into that specific viewer. So let's go about building a composition, shall we? Let's do something really basic. I'm going to close my effects library and I'm going to open my media pool. Now, this sci-fi film, what we have is, in fact, if I jump back to the edit page just quickly, what we have right at the beginning are, you know, two people in capsules floating through space. The capsules collide and then start spinning off. And you'll see we've got things like heads-up displays. There's cracks on the glass in these scenes, but we don't have that on this clip number 7 in the timeline. It's just a clean plate of this woman or this actress in this pod. So we're gonna build a composition. We're actually going to try and blend it in with the rest of these scenes. So you see shots like this. It's a slightly wider shot of her where we've got an overlay, we've got cracks in the glass. And to do that, I'm just going to go up to my media pool, and you'll see I've got a few elements in here that I want to use. One of these elements should be, let me have a quick look. It should be, so it's teaser stuff. Heads up display mov, that's what I'm looking for. So this heads up display.mov file, I'm just going to drag that down into my composition. Again, if I want to view this on any of the viewers, I'll just hit a number. Now the global in out of that has been changed, so I'm just going to adjust that. It's not something we're going to have to worry about a lot. It just happens to be with this specific media. So there we go. I've now loaded my media into, which my heads up display, into viewer 1. And I'm also still viewing my output on viewer 2. Now, this isn't going to be a massive composition that we're doing, but it is always helpful to organize things, labeling things, whether it's tracks, nodes, anything like that, just helps us keep track of everything. So I'm going to select my media in 1 node, and I'm going to hit F2, which is rename. You can also, right click on the node and go to rename in there if you want. And I'm going to call this actress. There we go. I tend to do everything in capitals just so it's a little bit easier for me to read. But you know, it's totally your choice. And for this second node, which we know is our heads up display or our HUD, I'm going to hit F2 again and just put HUD in there. And there we go. We'll add another clip, but it's not joined into our flow, this graph that we have. It's completely separate. So how do we go about joining this heads up display with our actress as the background? What do we do at this point? Well, we're going to merge these nodes. And the way to do that is to actually use a specific node called the merge node. Now, you might notice that underneath the viewers and above the node graph, we have the timeline ruler up here, which the yellow vertical bars here show the extent of the clip that's used in the timeline. Anything to the side of that is the handle. So these sections aren't used in the timeline. This is just the extent that is. We have our transport controls, and we have this toolbar down here. It doesn't have all the tools in Fusion because there's hundreds of tools in Fusion, and you can make custom tools. You can do loads of stuff. It just has the sort of quick access ones that you're going to sort of end up using a lot. And one of them, if I use these, I don't know how well they come across over Zoom. There's these white vertical or light gray vertical lines here, and I'm just going to use them as a reference point for when I'm navigating. So if I come in one, come into the second vertical line from the left, the tool to the right of that, if I hover over that, you'll see is my merge node. And if I just click on that, you'll see it's added in a merge node into my composition. Now, what I can do is I can start disconnecting pipelines and dragging and doing all that, which is a fine way to work. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to delete that node. I'm going to make sure my actress node is selected. That media end, that's the actress. I'm going to select that, make sure it's highlighted orange. and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to click on merge, and you'll see now that it's just put the merge in between the media in and the media out nodes, and it's still not connected to the heads up display. We have to do this, and that's fine. We're easily able to connect these, but it's a good chance to have a look at what these different inputs or these different icons are all around each of the nodes. So you'll see, like the media in nodes, they have a blue triangle on them and they have a white box on one side. But if we look at our merge node, there's other colored triangles, same white box. What does it all mean? So the orange input on any node in Fusion is our background input. The green node is our foreground. So in this case, we want our heads up display to appear over her face because it's in front of her face. It's being projected on the glass of the pod that she's in. So in this case, our actress is our background, our heads up display is our foreground. The blue input is our effects mask input and our matte input. And we'll get into that in a little bit. Right now, not super worried about it. All we need to do is connect the output. So that's what this white square is on this side of every node. The white square is the output. If I just click and drag that down to the merge node, it'll automatically just apply that to our foreground input. Now I could click and drag it somewhere else if I wanted. I could click and drag it purposefully over the effects mask. That's not what I want. I want it to go into the green input, and that is our heads up display. Now, the heads up display doesn't have an alpha channel in it. So what you'll see is that it's just a black image over the top now. Handy little trick, actually, if you ever want to swap background and foreground inputs really quickly, is Control plus T or Command plus T if you're on a Mac. And you'll see that when I hit that, the heads up display is now going into the background. The actress is now going into the foreground. Handy little trick. Nothing you need to be super worried about. But as I was saying, the heads up display doesn't have an alpha channel in it, so it doesn't have transparency information. There's nothing to say that our the black parts of the image should be transparent. So we have to change our composite mode in order to have that be viewable. So if I select my merge node, you'll see that we have over here in the right hand side of the viewer, we have our inspector, which is where all of our parameters are for controlling each node. So if I select the heads up display again, I have different parameters than when I select the merge node. If I select the merge node and just come over to the apply mode, you might see this in other places in Resolve. I believe in the color page, if you change the composite mode on a layer node, it's called composite mode and not apply mode, but it's roughly the same idea. It's how we're merging these two layers together. And I'm just going to select screen there. And there you go. You can now see our heads up display over the top of our actress. And again, because I'm viewing the media out node on viewer 2, I'm seeing everything that's downstream of these two nodes. So the media out node is pretty much, if not always, the last node in your node workflow, your node graph. If, for example, I was viewing the actress node up there, you'll see I only see the actress node on there. I only see the heads up display node on there. So this is what catches a lot of people out when they're using Fusion the first time, is they might add a load of nodes together and then they start making changes. If I change the apply mode on that merge from screen to color dodge, I don't see a change. And it's because I'm not viewing the output or a node downstream of the change that I'm making. So if I now put that up there, it's not a massive change, but you can see there is a change in the heads up display there. So if you're ever working in the Fusion page and you start making changes and you're not seeing them happen, you're adjusting a parameter for a node and nothing's happening in your viewer, just go back and check which nodes you have on which viewers. It's a really simple thing, but it catches quite a lot of people out. So I always try and reiterate that as much as possible. You'll probably see me do it several times throughout this. It is very easy to forget which nodes you're viewing. So we've got our heads up display. If I hit play now, okay, you know, it looks like just a static image that's sort of being thrown over the top there. It's really not that engaging. What we're trying to do, like we looked at earlier, is build something closer to this. So let's go about building on our composite. Before I do that, really quickly, one last thing to sort of show you is you can organize these nodes however you want. So I tend to go with my media in on the left-hand side, my media out on the right-hand side, and then I'll just build whatever I'm doing in between there, whether it's vertically up or vertically down. That's generally how I tend to work. But you can work completely vertically if you want. If I move the heads up display over to the right here, you'll see that this foreground input on the merge actually jumps over to the side there. I could move the actress node up top, and I could move my media out node down below. So you can work in whatever way you want. There's nothing to stop you, you know, just going diagonally if you want, or whatever it is. So I've heard people sort of, you know, be a bit confused, like, oh, what way am I meant to, you know, build my workflow? It's totally personal preference. Like I said, I tend to work left to right just because it's easier for me to understand. So here we go. Let's build out this composition. One thing that we want to do is this pod that she's in. If I hit play again, that pod that she's in, the glass is cracked. She's, you know, streaking through space. It's going to be jumpy. It's going to be jittery. It's going to be, you know, damaged. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to add a camera shake node in between the heads up display and the merge. And the way I'm going to do that, I could go through to the effects library in the top left, and I could search for it through tools. And that works, you know, if you're looking for a specific tool, or you want to know all different categories that are up there, you know, it works. There's absolutely nothing against that. But my preferred way of working, just because it's a little bit quicker, is to use Shift. If I hold down Shift and then just hit the space bar, I can't remember on Mac if Shift spacebar is for Spotlight or if that's Alt spacebar, but it's on a Mac it'll either be Shift spacebar or Alt spacebar. It'll be one of the two. On Windows, it's hold down Shift, hit the spacebar, and you'll get a little pop-up window that allows you to select a tool. And this is because I know the tools that I'm working for. Again, if I didn't know what I was really looking for, I could go through the effects library and build them that way. But I know I'm looking for a camera shake. So if I start typing in camera, you'll see it narrows these down, second one down, camera shake. Now, if I just click on it and then hit add, it's now added a camera shake in between the heads up display and the merge. So if I hit play, you'll see the heads up display now jumps around. Now, the reason I've put it between the heads up display and the merge and not after, if I drag that out there, and just for reference, how I'm dragging that out of the node without having to disconnect all the pipes is, again, if you hold down Shift and then click on a node, you can disconnect it or reconnect it just by hovering over these pipes as well. So if I do that and drop it just in there. So I've now put the camera shake after the merge, and you'll see it shakes everything. That's not what I want. I only want to affect the heads up display. So what I'm doing by putting the nodes in between the heads up display and the merge, I'm only affecting the heads up display. A good description I heard of Fusion a while ago was it's like Lego, it's building blocks. Everything builds on what's underneath it, basically. So it's a simple way of approaching it. You know, you don't need to sort of get complex about nodes versus layers or all this sort of stuff. It's all like Lego. You're just building your effects piece by piece. You know, there's no magic tool that's going to give us everything that we're going to do. You know, I want to apply a camera shake to this. I might do a blur. I might do, you know, a few other things to this heads up display. There's no sort of one hit tool for all of that. It's all just placing all of these separate individual elements in to build a bigger picture. So here we go. Got my camera shake in there. If I hit play, it doesn't look like a digital display shaking. You know, it's too smooth and wobbly I want it to appear more as like a damaged projection that's sort of flickering on and off and appearing in different places. Now, to do that, I have some parameters already set out that I know off by heart. You can go into the inspector, again, make sure that you've got your the right node selected. You can go into the inspector and you can play around, but in the interest of time, I'm going to do this manually. So 0.063 for X, 0.0142, 0.024, and every time I'm entering a value into these fields, every time I hit enter, it just takes me down to the next field, which is really handy. I don't have to spend a lot of time doing anything else. That's the wrong thing in there. There we go, 0.61 and 0.252. So here we go. If I hit play now, whoops, if I hit play now, it's a lot less sort of swinging around all over the place. It's very, very sort of subtle. But again, it's smooth between, you know, where it's shaking from and to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to the inspector again, and under frequency method, I'm going to set that to square wave. So now it's going to be on or off, basically. It's going to jump to one place, jump to another, and there's not going to be that sort of smooth transition between. And you can see that here. It's a lot less of that sort of smooth, swinging, you know, motion that we had before. We're trying to go for that digital, you know, a broken sort of digital projection. So there we go. We've got that built in. And we're just going to keep building on this. You know, we're going to build it up and try and blend it in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a lens reflection. Again, another tool that I know exists. We have tons of different tools in Fusion, and we're not going to go through all of them. We're just showing you some of the things that can be done with what's already in Fusion. So I've added some lens reflections. And again, if I pull that out and put it back in, you can see, there we go. You can see it just adds, you know, some reflections, blurred out reflections just over the top here. And again, I have parameters in here. I can make those reflections brighter, darker. I might make them just a little bit brighter maybe. And I might actually use this global colorize slider just to pull a little bit of the color out of them. I don't want it to be too distracting. And you'll see they now move in tandem with that camera shake as well. And let's keep going. So something that you'll always or see a lot of the time in sci-fi films is something I find quite funny, which is all the sort of text that you see a lot of time is still scan lines. So it's almost as if it's you know, being projected on an interlaced display, or you know, whatever they're doing to it is the projection itself is interlaced. So I'm going to do that as well. I'm going to add in some scan lines. Now that might be a bit much. If I pull down the sort of line frequency a little bit, line sharpness, make them a little bit sharper, maybe push some more back in there. You can change the angle of it if you want to. I'm not too bothered about that. What I might actually do is I might swap the lens reflection and the scan lines around just to see the effect that that gives me. So I now have, you know, that sort of scan line effect on the heads up display before it hits the lens reflections, because before the lens reflections we're also showing those scan lines as well. So it's all about, you know, what you find you know, pleasing, the look you're going for. And again, it shows the flexibility of Fusion. If I don't like how something looks and I want to try out, you know, just reordering the nodes, it's really easy to do. I just hold down Shift, click on my node, and I can drag it out. If I hold down Shift again, click on my node, I can just drag it over until that pipe, that connection pipe highlights, and then let go. So really simple, really quick, and really easy to just sort of play around with and get the look you're going for. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of lens blur, because, you know, we're focused on her face. You know, it's not the you know, the sort of deepest depth of field that we're going for. We're going for quite a shallow depth of field. So the heads up display would be slightly out of focus to us. So I'm just going to make sure that my lens reflection node is selected. I'm going to hold down Shift, hit the space bar, and then I'm just going to search for the lens blur. And then if I hit enter, it adds in that lens blur for us there. Now, by default, maybe a bit too strong. So again, come over to the inspector, pull that down just a little bit. You know, there's chroma shifts we can add in. There's a lot we can do with this image. But for now, I think that's good. So what we've gone from, if I get my actress node here, drag that up to my first viewer, this is what we've gone from to this is what we've built. If I just hit play, you'll see it's starting to look a bit more like this shot further down the timeline. Now I could scale, you know, the heads up display up a little bit if I wanted to. You know, you can do huge amount to try and build any effect that you can think of. One of the last things I might do to this is actually, if I select my merge node again, I said I wanted to make it appear broken, and right now it's just sort of jumping around and flickering. What I actually wanted to do is actually get brighter and darker as well in a sort of random fashion, so it looks as if it's flickering on and off in different places. And to do that, I'm going to select my merge node here. Something that I didn't talk about actually, which I've just realized, is navigating the node window. I've been doing quite a bit of it without actually talking about it. And it's one of the reasons I always recommend a 3-button mouse for working in Resolve. Same with the color page. If you want to navigate in the viewer and the color page, you use the middle mouse button to press down, hold, and move around. And it's the same on the Fusion page. So your scroll wheel or your middle mouse button, you click and drag, or click and hold, you can then drag your node graph around. You can use control. If I hold down control and then scroll in and out, you'll see I actually zoom in and out of my node graph. I can also, this is a little known one, if I press down the middle mouse button, so the scroll wheel and the left click at the same time, and move my mouse left to right, I can do the same thing. I can zoom in and out there. And when I zoom in too far, or if any of my nodes move off of the screen, you'll see I get a little pop-up here that shows me the position of the nodes that aren't visible. And I can just click and move around there if I want. If I want to stay zoomed in, I can click and move around in this window. Or if I zoom out again until they're all on screen, you'll see it just disappears really, really quickly. So that's some navigation. What I'll do, or go into what I was saying I was going to do, which was I'm going to affect the brightness of the heads-up display, so as if it's flickering on and off. And the way I'm going to do that is with this gain slider here. So you'll see as I slide the gain slider all the way down to 1 on the merge node, the foreground disappears and we're just left with the background. Now, if you've used Resolve before, you're probably aware that these are the auto keyframe buttons. So I could I can click on that, turn on auto keyframes, move to different points in the timeline and adjust the gain and do it that way. But it's a bit of a time-consuming process. I just want to automate this with some sort of random motion. And the way I'm going to do that is if I right-click on the gain parameter there and just go down to modify with, and I'm going to modify this with a shake. And what that's going to do, if I hit play now, you'll see it just shakes this gain slider up and down in a random fashion. Now, my problem with this is very much that it's like the movement we had earlier. It's too smooth. I don't want that. I want like a harsh sort of flicker. And what we did there was we added a modifier to this parameter. And by doing that, so when I right-clicked and went modify with and selected shake, by adding that modifier, we enabled this modifiers tab here at the top of the inspector. So if I click on that now, you'll see I can generate random seeds for the shake effect, but I can also affect the smoothness. So if I reduce the smoothness, say I bring this down to, I don't know, 2.5 and then hit play, you'll see it's a lot less smooth, and we're now getting that sort of flickering on off like you'd see or you'd expect to see from a broken sort of projection digital display type thing. And again, if I'm not happy with that, I can hit reseed and it'll just randomly generate the shake again. And you can go in, you could, adjust it, do whatever you want. But it's just about showing that those modifiers exist and how you use them. So we're getting to the end of this composition there. I'm kind of happy with it. The only missing element we have, if I move my nodes around a bit, in fact, you know what? I'll bring them down just so I don't have to zoom out as much. So here we go. One thing that we don't have that we have in these other shots, if I jump to another one of these shots, on the edge, you'll see we have cracked glass. Of all these shots in the pod, we have cracked glass to the left of her face, to the right of this viewer. So we're going to add that. So to do that, I'm just going to come up to my media pool again, where I have my glasscrack.jpg, and just click and drag that in to our node graph. And again, if I hit 1, or I use any of the buttons underneath, or I can click and drag it up to a viewer, you'll see we have this still image of some cracked glass. And again, to join this in with our current composition, we're going to have to merge it again. Now, we could do, we could use the merge from the toolbar. If we select merge and hit merge up there, you'll see it adds that. I could just click anywhere in the node graph and hit merge. That's another handy little thing about Fusion. If you don't have a node selected, the last place you click in the node graph, so if I click down here, for example, and then add a merge, that's where it adds that tool. So the last place you clicked in the node graph is where it will add the next tool. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to select a merge. In fact, I'll select my media in 1, and I'll rename it. Again, I'll use F2. I'll type in glass. And if I drag this output, that, remember we talked, the white square is the output from that node. If I just drag that down to the output of the merge below and let go, Fusion automatically creates another merge node for us and adds it in. Now I'm going to do the same thing with this merge node that I did with the first. Again, there's no alpha channel here, so I'm just going to go to apply mode, change that to screen. And we now have our glass over the top, but we know it's over on the right-hand side of our viewer, or it is in all the other shots. So how do we get it there? Just like anything else in Fusion, we're going to use a node to do it. And the node we're going to use, if I hit Shift spacebar, is our transform node. If I can spell, there we go, transform. And if I add the transform between the glass and the merge, I can now either use the on-screen display, so these arrows that you have here and the ring around the outside for rotating, or I can use the parameters in the inspector as well. So I can, whoops, that's the pivot. I can change where it is. I can choose, the angle of rotation and things like that as well. So I'm just going to use the on-screen displays just so it's a little bit quicker. I might just pop that about there, shall we? Yeah, why not? That's what we're going to do. I'm making it super obvious. I'm not by any stretch of the imagination a full-time compositor. So, I'm not making this look perfect for the webinar. I'm just doing it as a bit of a demonstration. So we've got our glass positioned. Again, we're facing the same problem that the glass is in focus, shows her face, but actually the heads-up display, which is between the two, is out of focus. So we're going to do the same thing. If I select my transform node, if I go to Shift spacebar and add in a lens blur. In fact, whoops, let's undo that. Let's have a look at a different type of blur. If I do that, it's a thing called a Prism Blur, again, which is in Infusion, and you'll see that Prism Blur splits out into different color channels. So we've got that sort of pinkish magenta hue next to that greenish going into blue hue there. And again, all the parameters for that node, when I've selected it, are just over here in the inspector. So I might blur it a little bit more. I can choose the distance from the original that chromatic aberration is. I can choose how strong that is. I might push it out a little bit. I can even add a little bit of a vignette to it as well. And to avoid any sort of harsh edges around that node, I'm going to select my merge, and just here where it says edges, we have a drop down box, and we're just going to hit duplicate. Now, it's not a big change, but if you watch the side of her face here, if I set that back to what it was on canvas, you'll see there's a pretty harsh edge where that crack is meant to end. And that's not what I want. I want it to just sort of blend in and wrap around. So I'm just going to set that to duplicate, and you'll see it just sort of blends that, duplicates it across as well over there. And that's it. We've done our first composition. If I jump back to the beginning and hit play, we have our flickering heads up display with the scan lines and the blur next to the cracked glass as well. So it's there blending in a lot more with the rest of the scene that we were working on. So really handy, really quick insight into compositing. But let's have a look at something else, something that an editor might be asked to do a bit more regularly than sort of adding composites. And that's some sort of cleanup. Some basic cleanup of a shot. Maybe there's a boom in shot or something like that. Think Game of Thrones. The Starbucks coffee cup that was left on the table. That's what we're just going to have a quick look at now. And the clip we're going to do that on is this clip here. So if I hit play, in fact, I'll hit play. In fact, you know what I'll do? I'll jump to the color page, and I'll just full screen this a little bit, just so you can get a better idea. Now, the director's not happy because he's meant to be in a medically induced coma, but if you watch his eyes, you'll see they're sort of flickering all over the place. Very much like when, if you've got a newborn puppy and it's dreaming, it's chasing something, and its dreams and its legs going, his eyes are all over the place in that shot. And the director doesn't want that. He wants those eyes to be completely still. So how do we do that quickly, easily, and efficiently in Fusion? Let's dive into it. The first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to build a clean plate. So the clean plate is going to be basically the part of the image that we're going to use to replace what's happening. It is our clean source. And the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to come all the way along to the end of this composition. So frame 773 here. And I'm going to add in, I'll jump right to the beginning, start from the beginning. I'm going to select my media node. Again, I'm just going to rename this really quickly, F2, actor. So I know what my background is. And I'm going to add what's called a time stretcher node. So if I type in time stretcher, there we go. It now adds a time stretcher in between the two for me. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to take it out of that. I don't want it in between those. A handy thing about Fusion in the node-based workflow is that the output isn't a one-to-one basis. I can actually click on the output again and drag that up to my time stretcher. So I can have the same source node feeding multiple downstream nodes as well. So this is what I'm doing. I'm taking my actor out into this time stretcher node here. And the time stretcher node, you'll see as I play through, is just hanging on a single frame. And that's the slate at the beginning. So if I go back to the beginning, select my time stretcher node, you'll see in the inspector here, it gives me a source time. What frame do I want it to hang on? I want it to hang on. It was frame 773 was the last frame of this clip. So I'm going to go with that. And now if I scrub through, you'll see it just hangs on that last frame there. So this is it. This is what's going to be our clean plate. Whereas eyes aren't moving, it's a single frame. We don't have to worry about much. Now we're just copying the eyes across. We're not doing anything else. We're not copying the whole face, just the eyes. So I need to mask those out. And the way I'm going to do that, if I click, just make sure we've not got any nodes selected, just click in the node graph. I'm going to come back up to this toolbar. Instead of going to the merge, which was on our second divider, I'm going to go along to our third white divider here, and then in 3. So it's this node here, our Polygon Node. If I click on that, it adds a Polygon node, a node that allows me to draw a mask. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to hold down Control on my keyboard, or Command if you're on a Mac, and then just use my scroll wheel to zoom in on the viewer. Again, if I want to move the viewer, I press down on the scroll wheel, that middle mouse button. And with the polygon selected, I can just click and start to add a mask. If I click and hold and drag, you can see I can now add little rotation points for that mask or that point as well. I'm just going to do that. Again, I'm not being super precise with this for the sake of the webinar and time, but what I did there is basically just built a loop, and then when I got to the last point, again, clicked it to close that loop. If I click on any of these control points, I can position them so I can move them in and out, and you'll see I get these little handles to control the sort of smoothing of the corners there. So that's roughly good. I might click here actually when that line highlights, add another control point, and just go in and smooth a little bit of this out, just so I'm not doing anything silly. So there we go. I've created a mask. If I click on one with my polygon node selected and it goes into this viewer, you'll see that's my mask. If we're super zoomed in on any of the viewers, we're zoomed out and we want to fit it to the viewer again, we want to fit the image to the viewer. In the color page, you would use Shift Z to do that. On the Fusion page, it's slightly different. We just use Control or Command if you're on a Mac, Control F, and then it'll fit our source to that viewer again. So there we go. We've got our mask around his eyes. And to control that mask, I'm going to select the time stretcher, Shift Space. I'm going to add a matte control node in there. So the matte control node just gives us a bit more control over the sort of shapes that we're using to mask. So now that I've put matte control after time stretcher, I'm going to drag from the output of the polygon node into the matte control. And this is quite interesting. So if I do that, you'll see that it connects automatically to the effects mask. And that's not what I want. I don't want it to go on the effects mask. I want to make a garbage map with this. So because there's different inputs on multiple different nodes, if I hover over them, I can see which ones there are. If I hover over, there we go. The dark gray one is the garbage map. The blue one is my effects mask. Green one is foreground. The white one is my solid map. And I can hover over them and find the right one and then try and drag it right to that. And it can be a little bit fiddly. But I don't want to have to do that. I can actually right click on the output of the node. You'll see that when I right click and hold, it still allows me to draw a connection pipe. But if I go over to matte control now and I just let go, it gives me a little pop-up window where I can select which input it will connect to. I'm just going to select garbage matte just there. So now if I view my matte control node, you'll see it's cut out his eyes and the rest of it is left. Well, that's the inverse of what we want. We want to take just the eyes. I don't want the rest of the scene. So I'm just going to select my polygon node again, and I'm just going to hit invert. And there we go. If I click off that, you'll see it's just his eyes that we now have selected in there. So really quick, really easy. If we want to, I can select the polygon node, and you'll see over here in the inspector, we have soft edge. So I can just blur that a little bit. I might, if I click off that, I might maybe increase the border width just ever so slightly, not too much. I don't want to do anything silly. So we've got our clean plate now. How are we going to fit it to the rest of this shot? Because it's a moving shot. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to track this. I'm going to use the planar tracker to do this. And I'm going to track the base shot. So what I'm going to do is select the actor node here, Shift Space, Planar Tracker. And there we go. It's added in a planar tracker for me. If I hit 1 on that and I scrub along, I'm going to scrub along to the end just because it's a bit easier for me to draw on his face here. So with the planar tracker selected, yes, it's going to track, but we also need to draw a little mask or a little window around what we want it to track. And in this case, I want to track his face. So I'm doing the exact same thing I did with the polygon, just drawing a mask around his face because this is what I want to track. There we go. I now need to set a reference point for the planar tracker. So we're basically saying track from this frame, this is your go-to reference. And with the planar tracker selected, we can do that up here in the inspector. You'll see reference time. If I hit set, it sets that to frame 773, which we know is the last frame in this clip. And I have track forward, so track to end, and I have track to start controls down here. You can also track frame by frame if you want to make slight adjustments and changes. We're just going to hit track to start, and you'll see it's put in all these tracking points that it's then following across the face. So that's quite a good track, I would say. It's done a good job for us. Now, what we do, we're going to take the information from the tracker. We're not going to use the tracker node itself for this. It's going to create a planar transform. So it's basically just taking all the tracking information it had and turns that into a transform node for us. And we do that with this button in the inspector here, this create planar transform. If I click on that, you'll see it adds this little planar transform node for us, and I can take the planar tracker out of my node graph. Again, holding shift and clicking to do that. I'm not deleting it because I'm going to use it. I'm going to use it later for a little something, because we're not just getting rid of, or we're not just getting rid of the sort of jumping around eyes. We're just going to do a little bit more after this. So what do we do now that we have our planar tracker? Well, we can just connect the output of the mat control to that. So our garbage mat here is now connected to the planar transform. And I'm just going to create another merge. And all I did there, again, drag from the output of the planar transform to the output of the actor node, and it made a merge for us here. Now, what you should see, again, I'll jump to the color page because it's just a little bit quicker to get this up. What you should now see, if my system wants to play ball and not freeze on me, is all that jumping around in his eyes, all of that motion is completely gone. His eyes are completely still. So that is a really easy way to do a sort of quick cleanup on a shot like that. But that's not it. Client's never happy, director's never happy. It's always changes to be made. And he's not happy now about this scratch on the head. Doesn't like it, doesn't like the look of it, doesn't fit, whatever it is, whatever reason they want it gone. Now, we could follow the same workflow, but the problem is we don't actually have a clean bit of his forehead. There's no point where his forehead doesn't have that scratch on it. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to use the paint tool in Fusion to paint that out. So I'm just going to clean up my node graph a little bit here. My fat fingers will let me with my mouse. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take time stretcher node. I could add another time stretcher node if I wanted, but I'm not. If I've already done the work with one of them, why do it again? So I'm going to select my time stretcher node, hit Control C or Command C if you're on a Mac, click anywhere in my node graph, Control V, and just paste it out again. So there we go. Just feed the output of the actor node into that. And really, really simply, we've got the same sort of clean plate, the same starting point for us there. And instead of doing, mat control and a polygon to mask around it, we'll do a little bit more of that in a second. We're going to add a paint tool. So if I select time stretcher node, shift space, type in paint and enter, you'll see I now have a paint node added after the time stretcher. Now, this is one of the ones where it catches a lot of people out without thinking, because they'll just go on to like drawing straight away. They just start drawing something. If I, start drawing something, nothing happens. All of a sudden, I bring that node up. You'll see I've drawn absolute garbage there. That's not what I want. So again, just make sure you know which nodes are on your viewers. If you ever find yourself where you've added a node and it's not doing what you wanted it to, make sure that you're just viewing the right node. So I've added my paint node here. And we have a lot of different controls. We have things like our multi-stroke controls here, which aren't the tools we're looking for. They're generally more for sort of like, fixing a bit of dirt or dust on, that might be on a frame or something like that. And they generally only last a frame as well. They're not by default set up to last the duration of the clip. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come across here along the top of the viewer to stroke, single stroke mode. And then in the inspector for this, you'll see we have different apply modes. We have color. So that's exactly what I was just doing, where you can, draw on whatever you want. We have clone, we have emboss, erase, merge, smear, stamp, all these different apply modes. I'm just going to select clone in there. There are brush controls as well. So, I might want to adjust the size of the softness. I'm going to leave it as they are for just now. I'm just going to zoom in on my image. So with the clone apply mode selected, I first have to hold down the Alt or Option key if you're on a Mac, and then click where I want to clone from. So I've just chosen slightly off from the scar or the scratch, whatever it is, by holding down Alt and then left clicking. And now when I move my cursor over here and click and drag, you'll see I can just paint that out. Now, it's a little bit lighter than the rest of his face, so I might just sort of dab that a little bit just to try and blend it in. And there might be a tiny bit in his eyebrow. So if that's the case, I might adjust the brush size for this, maybe a little bit of a smaller brush. Do the same thing, except this time I'm going to select a bit of the eyebrow, hold down Alt, and click there where it leaves that X, and then maybe just draw. Again, I'm not being super precise with this, but I'd say that's close enough. That's going to work for us. We've painted out that scratch now. Again, we've painted out the scratch in the reference. We just need to now track this across to, what am I doing? Command Control F, and I'm going to click off any nodes, Control F in there as well. So we've done the paint. We just need to do the same thing we did earlier. So we're going to mask that area out with a polygon and a map control. We're going to create another planar tracker, and then we're just going to merge them all together. So really quickly, I'm going to add a map control. I'm going to select a polygon tool. So I've added a polygon tool in there. If I remember, hold down right click on the output of the polygon tool, drag it over the map control, release, select garbage map, zoom in. I'm just going to draw a little bit of a polygon. It's going to be a little bit sketchy. Again, sort of trying to fly through this as much as we can here. And now, remember, I didn't get all the tracking I did with a planar tracker, and I never deleted it. It's because we're going to use it to create another planar transform. So it's just going to do the exact same thing. I'm not tracking anything else. I'm just going to create a second planar transform for it. So hit create planar transform, throws the node down in here for me. And we're basically just replicating the top part of our node graph along the bottom here now. So if I feed that into there, might move my media out node a little bit there, and then drag the output of my media out node to the output of the first merge, creates another merge after that. And it's had a bit of a mess. Why has it done that? Is it because I've inverted it? It is, because I've not inverted it. So that step we did with the original polygon, where we basically cut out his eyes and we're just left with the rest of the frame, and we inverted the polygon, need to do that again down here. So if I hit invert, there you go. It's always the little things you miss when you're trying to demonstrate something. So there we go. I've now inverted that mask, so it's just everything inside of that area that we painted out that was going to stay. And again, if I hit play, you'll see it now tracks that with the rest of that frame. Really simple, really sort of quick, easy to do stuff. So that is, a quick cleanup. Might run a little bit over. I hope, I'm not running too late for a lot of people. We do have, we generally try and aim for sort of an hour-ish, but there's still quite a lot to get through. So I hope, I really appreciate you taking the time out to sit through us so far with this. We'll try and get through this as quickly as we can. So I just want to thank everyone for their time and any continued time they give us after this. So we've done the cleanup. We've done a little bit of compositing in there. Let's have a look at something else. Let's have a look at some titles. And titles are part of motion graphics. We can add the basic titles that we get in the effects library in the edit page. There's some pre-built titles for us here, but there's a whole raft of other titles that are called Fusion titles here. Again, they're templates, but we want to build our own, and it's really easy to do this in Fusion. For this film, I'm going to create some 3D titles, so not just the 2D sort of text that we're used to. I'm going to build some 3D titles. I'm going to animate them a little bit. And if I come up to my toolbar here, I'm going to come to the last section of all the tools in here, because this is where my 3D tools are. And they're all laid out quite sensibly. So we have image plane 3D, shape 3D, and text 3D. They are the sort of main things that we're going to do. We're either going to make an image plane, we're going to make a shape, or we're going to make some text. And then the 4 after that, merge 3D, camera 3D, spotlight 3D, and renderer 3D, are basically always going to be used regardless of whatever 3D object we make to begin with. And I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to make a text 3D, and I'm going to have to merge that in with a camera, because we need to be able to see our 3D object, some lighting as well. And then we need a renderer to take our 2D image, to take our 3D image, render it to a 2D image, and then we can merge it back in with the rest of our composition. So just going to do a little bit of moving around here if I can. Push them up. Here we go. So let's go through this a little bit more logically. Let's start with the name of the film. So I'm going to select the text 3D node, and I'm going to type in Hyperlight, because that's the name of the film. Again, if I want to see what I'm doing, if I select that node, hit 1, you'll now see the word Hyperlight appears in 3D space. Now, this is where navigating can get a little bit different in the viewers. If I hold down Control and Shift, I can move, I can pan that image around. I'm trying to remember what the keyboard shortcut is to rotate, but I cannot for the life of me. But I do know, again, there are, you can do this with just the mouse. So again, if I hold down middle click, I can do the pan. If I hold down middle click and left click, I can zoom in and out. And if I hold down middle click and right click, I can then rotate in my 3D space as well there. So I don't have to use keyboard modifiers. If I don't want to, I can just use it on the mouse. So there we go. We have our title, Hyperlight. And I'm going to choose a different text. I have a text or a font here called Tesla. It's a bit futuristic, a bit sort of, Blade Runner-y type, futuristic text. So I'm going to take that. And what else we're going to do? I'm going to extrude this. So if I rotate this sideways, actually, you'll see it's very thin. It is almost still a 2D title. And I want it to be a bit thicker. I want there, I'm making a 3D title. I want there to be light bouncing off it and all these sorts of things. So the way to do that is underneath the text and the font, if we come all the way down to these extrusion controls down here, I can choose Extrusion Depth. And as I move that slider up and down, you can see the front of the text now extrudes out from the rear. If I go into sort of a more side-on view, you'll see how that scales up and down as I do that. I'm not going to do anything crazy with it, probably just about there will do. So there we go. I have some nice sort of 3D titles there. If I look at my renderer, if you remember, our renderer is what takes our 2D image, our 3D image and renders it down to 2D. If I put that up on this viewer, it's empty. Why is it empty? Well, if I look at my 3D merge node here, I have my text node going into it, I have a camera node going into it, and I have a spotlight node going into it. The problem is they're all sitting on top of each other. So where the camera is looking is actually past the titles. So if I select my camera 3D, and I can do this in the viewer, so you'll see when I select a 3D object, I get 3 arrows, one on each axis. So X to go horizontally, Y to go vertically, and then Z for depth as well. So I can use the arrows to pull that out, or with the camera selected, I can go into the transform part of the inspector and use the Z slider to slide that back. And you'll see as it slides back, it comes into our frame there. No longer is the camera sitting on top of the text, it's sitting well in front of it. Again, I can zoom out so you can see where the camera is in relation to our 3D text. Now, I've added lighting in there as well. So if I select my 3D renderer again, I have a tick box here for enabling lighting. If I hit enable lighting, there's no lighting on the text. Again, because it's sitting, if you have a look at this, this is my spotlight in here, and it's sitting on top of the text. So again, if I pull that back, you'll see as I pull it back, the light then spills across the text in there. So I'm going to pull that back, probably maybe keep the edges in darkness a little bit. And now I can adjust things like the cone angle. So the angle that the light's coming out at, I can adjust that penumbra angle, which is basically the sort of lighter part of the shadows, almost like a sort of softening or roll off into the dark part. So I can play around and really sort of get, you know, something nice where it's not too dark on the edges, but we've still got a bit of brightness in the middle as well, something like that. So there we go, we've built some 3D titles. They're all white, we can leave them like that, or we can actually, you know, change the color on them. I could go to the color parameter here. If I click on that white box, I get a color picker, so I can actually go in and choose any sort of color I want. But if I want to be clever about this, if I bring my media in one node up onto this viewer, I want to match it to the sort of blue of this planet. And the way to do that is if I select my spotlight, all of the light coming out of this spotlight now is whatever color I select. So I could go in and you know, try and sort of eyeball it, or I could use this little color picker at the side here. If I click and hold on that, you'll see I can sort of go over to, you know, a lightish blue part of that planet and let go. And now all of the light hitting my text is that sort of same shade of blue there. So there we go, we've built some 3D titles. How do we get these into the rest of our composition? Well, in the same way that we would with anything. We've rendered it. We can't, you know, add a merge 3D, can't merge a 3D object with a 2D object. It's just not going to work. That's why we have the renderer. But we can take the output of the renderer into a 2D merge. So that's just our standard merge. We have merge 3D for 3D elements. So now if I view my media out node, you'll see we have the word hyperlight appearing over that shot of the planet. And it's cool, but it's a bit static. You know, we might want a bit more than that. So we're going to do some animation. And to do that, I'm going to select my text 3D node again. And I'm going to add another modifier like we did with the gain on that earlier clip where we added a shake and we sort of turned it on, that heads up display on and off using a shake modifier. This time we're going to use what's called a follower modifier. So if I right click on this text box in here, and you'll see follower is just down, it's just one of the options down there. If I select follower, again, I now have access to this modifiers tab at the top here. If I go into that, you'll see I have lots of controls for this. So what am I going to do? I'm going to have, if I look at my text here, what I want to do, I'm going to have it start at a 90-degree angle to us and then rotate letter after letter. So I'm going to go to my transform here. I'm going to come down to rotation. So at the beginning, I'm going to make sure I'm on the first frame, if I can, the first frame of the, first frame of the render, which is frame 4. I'm going to click on the small diamond icon next to the Y rotation. So now it's keyframing. Every time I move to a different frame and adjust that parameter, it's going to make a keyframe. So I'm going to set that to be 90. So they're now 90 degrees to the camera. And now if I jump in, let's go to about 32 frames and set that back to 0, you'll now see as I play, my text all rotates in. And that's kind of cool, you know, it works, but I want it to do it letter after letter. And the way to do that using the follower is to come across to this timing section here. So everything we did there, the rotations we did under transform, everything else we're going to do under timing. And right now there's no delay between each of the characters. So the first character is what the rest of them will follow. They'll follow the one in front of it. And because there's no delay, they go all at the same time. If I increase the delay, you see, as I increase the delay, the numbers start, or the letters start to turn out depending on where I am. I'm not going to go crazy with it. I might put it out to about 2. Why not? So now if I hit play, the H should turn in first, then the Y, and so on. Oops. There we go. Just a little bit more dynamic, a little bit of a change as well. And it's not the only change that I'm going to make. I'm actually going to keyframe something different. I'm not going to keyframe anything different in the text, but I'm going to keyframe the spotlight. Now, remember how we, at the beginning of our merge node, they were all sitting on top of each other. Well, I'm going to actually go back to that at the beginning. If I move my playhead back to the first frame, it was the Z position that we changed. You'll see I can still drag it in and out. I'm actually going to start, so all the text is in darkness. I'm going to go back to the beginning, change Z so it's at 0. I'm going to add a keyframe. And I'm going to go to about the same position. Was it frame 32 I was on, I think? And now I'm just going to pull that up a bit to where I want it to be. There we go, just about there. So now not only are the letters going to rotate, they're going to light up as well as we go through that sequence. Really simple, really easy to do. Again, it's all just building blocks, just building one thing on top of the other. The fact that we can keyframe every parameter, the fact that we already have modifiers that we can apply like shape, like follow, it means that we have a really sort of big toolbox when it comes to building any effect that we want. So what else are we going to do? Okay, there's only 2 things left to get through, so I'll try and do these pretty quickly. The last thing we're going to do is we've done all that, or sorry, the second to last thing we're going to do is we've built all this text here. We've built, you know, our titles for this film, and I like them. I might use them again. So how do I go about, you know, making an easy to access, you know, template for this? Because I don't want to have to sit and do this every time. You know, that's 20 minutes, half an hour of my day spent just building titles that I already know how to make. It's just a bit of a pain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of my 3D nodes. If I just click and drag, select all of those 3D nodes there. I'm not bothered about the rest of them, just the 3D ones, because they are my titles. And I'm going to right click on them, and I'm going to come up to macro. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a macro in here. And basically, whenever we run that macro, it's just going to generate those nodes again for us. It's going to make a node that contains everything already in it. So if I go to macro, create macro, you'll get a pop-up window like this that looks really complex and confusing at first. I'm just going to collapse that. What we're basically saying with this is for each node that I've selected and each of the modifiers, I'm not too worried about the modifiers. We're choosing which of the parameters we are going to keep and make available to us next time we run this macro. So for example, I want the output of the renderer to be available because I need to connect that to another merge to bring it into my scene. You know, I might want to keep the output of my merge available if I want to connect it to different things. Same with the camera, same with the text. Again, remember, you can take the output of any node to multiple other nodes if you want. So I'll do the same with Spotlight. I'm just making sure that the output of these nodes is always available to me when I run this macro. The next thing I'm going to do is if I open, say, Spotlight, you'll see all of these different parameters if I don't enable these, next time I run the macro, or when I run the macro, I'm not going to be able to adjust these. So I'm just going to get what I have set originally, but I might not want that the next time I use these titles. So I might want to be able to enable or disable the lighting. I might want to be able to change, you know, the red, green, and blue values, the intensity, how it decays, all these sorts of things. I might want to be able to change next time I use this sort of title template. So I'm making sure I'm ticking all of those. Close that. And I'll do the same with text. So text, I'm going to make sure that I can change the text, the font that I use, the style, again, color if I want, if there's an alpha, sizing, and character spacing. I'll leave it as that. Why not? And that's good. I'm now just going to give it a name. I'm going to call this Hyperlight Titles. Why not? And then I'm just going to hit close. And when I hit close, it's going to ask me if I want to save the changes to that. I'm going to select yes, and it's going to bring me a pop-up window as to where it wants to save them. Now, what I'll do is I will actually copy into the chat, just so people have a reference for it. These are the file paths that macros are stored under by default. You can save them to different locations if you want. That's why we get this pop-up window. But those are the default locations to look in for macros that you make. What I'm going to do is I'm also going to copy this file path because I'm going to need it in a second. And I'm just going to save it. Remember, Hyperlight Titles is what I titled it. Hit save. And if I now open a File Explorer window and go to that location, you'll see we have this .settings file. That's great, but I have it in Fusion. If I go to the edit page, say I want to just use it like any other Fusion title, I don't have it in here. And the way to get it in the edit page is really simple, actually. So if I'll go back to the Fusion page quickly, open the File Explorer. I'm going to take my Hyperlight titles that I just created, Control C, make a copy of those. Whoops. And I'm going to go back up a folder level. And in here, that's where we're in the macros folder. There's also a templates folder here. So if I go into templates and then edit, you'll see effects, generators, titles, transitions. Well, those are all the categories that appear in the effects library on the edit page. So I'm going to put it under titles and just Control V or Command V to just paste it in there. Now, if I go back to the edit page, it's still not going to be there because what I have to do is I have to restart Resolve. Anytime you add a template into Resolve whilst it's open, it's not going to automatically update it. You just need to restart Resolve. So I'll just close Resolve there. I apologize for my messy desktop background. I do have to lower the resolution when we do streaming things like this, just so it's not, the text isn't really tiny and it's actually legible in some form. So open up Resolve, go into our project here. Now that I've moved it to the templates folder, if I have my effects library open, look for, there it is, Hyperlight Titles. And I can hover over them and see how those titles look. So if I, wanted to drop these in somewhere else, I might want to drop them over a different clip, just in there. And now I go back to the Fusion page. My Hyperlight titles are just there contained in a single node. If I click on it, all the parameters that I used on, or I selected in those tick boxes, I didn't select a lot. I selected some of the ones for text and some of the ones for the lighting. So things like the cone angle, the penumbra angle, drop off, as well as styled text and font. So all the parameters that I use, I'm going to change, are already there. Again, if I wanted to change the color this time, I want to make it red, I can do that because those are the parameters that I selected to have be available for me. And the outputs as well. So if I look at this, you'll see there's actually multiple little white squares. If I hover over them, we have the output node, the output of the whole macro. We have the output of the titles, the output of the renderer, the output of the merge, the output of the, is that the merge as well? If I put that in there twice, very possibly. And then, I can't remember which ones those are, but basically those are all the outputs for that we selected to make sure were available to us when we made the macro. So there we go, making macros, making templates. One thing I should have said right at the beginning, which I completely sort of forgot about, was everything that we're doing here, don't worry about trying to sort of make notes and keep up with and all this sort of stuff, because it'll drive you crazy. There's a lot to go through. We will be putting this out on our YouTube channel. If you search Scan Pro Video on YouTube, we will be putting out this recording on there after the fact as well. And if you want a copy of it, we can let us know. We can send you a link to it once it's up there as well, just so you can go through and learn at your own pace. I know it's quite difficult to keep up as someone who sort of fires information at you on a webinar like this. So last thing we're going to do, we're going to look at green screening and we're going to look at color grading different elements. So if I go back to my edit page, I fit everything down here, you'll see I have two clips layered on top of each other. If I actually just move that one, we have that blue planet clip again, and we have a green screen clip on top of that. Now, what we've done previously with other compositions is in the Fusion page, I've got my top layer here, I've gone into the media pool and I've dragged in whatever other elements I want to use, but I don't have to do that. If I go to the edit page, where they're layered on top of each other, we're going to cut a hole. Basically, we're going to cut all this green out and reveal that blue planet underneath. All I have to do is select those two elements, those two clips on my timeline, right click and create a new Fusion clip. So when I do that, it adds a new Fusion clip to the timeline, to the media pool, and it looks like it's just the blue that we're seeing. But if I jump into the Fusion page now, you'll see it's already made a little composition for us. We have media in1, which is our background, which is the blue planet. That's what we want. And the foreground, media in2, is our window. So again, I'm just going to rename these really quickly just so I can keep track of everything. So media in1 is going to be planet, media in2 is going to be window. There we go. Cool. So let's do a bit of green screen, really. Like I said, Fusion compositions are really handy for this sort of work where you already know what your foreground and background are going to be. Just make a little Fusion clip and just send it straight to the Fusion page. It saves you, a couple of minutes where you're not messing around with merges or anything. So the tool I'm going to use to do this is called a delta keyer. So if I shift space and type in delta keyer, there we go, and enter. It's going to drop that between our window layer or our window source clip and the merge. And with my delta keyer selected, I just want to choose what color it is I'm going to key out. So again, I could go in and dial it in manually, or I can click and drag on the little pipette icon there and hover over, and you'll see as soon as I hover over it, or any other color for that matter, that it shows me what it's going to be like when I key that out. So if I let go there, straight away, we've keyed out all the green in that window. Now, there's a few things that might need tidying up on here. It's not the cleanest key in the world. There's some darkness down here that there shouldn't be. There might be a little bit of spill. It's done a really good job, but it's not perfect like I want it to be. So I have my delta keyer up in this viewer. And if I come along the top of the viewer here, you'll see we've got, the zoom level and lots of different controls for our viewers. But the one I'm interested in here, if I hover over it, is color. Got a drop down box next to it where I can choose to view individual channels. I could choose to view red, green, or blue, or the alpha. And that's what I'm interested in. If I click on color, it'll automatically show me the alpha channel. So it shows me anything white is what is being left, and anything that's black is what is being cut out. Now, if you look at the left-hand viewer, he's got a green patch on his chest there. It's a different shade of green to the window, but it is a green patch. So it is starting to try and cut that out. And I don't want that. I just want it to be this window section. And to clean this up, there's tons of different controls here. We have tools for like pre-matte adjustments, the actual matte itself, and fringing as well. I'm just going to go with delta keyer selected into the inspector, go to my matte controls, and I'm just going to raise the bottom threshold. So I'm really starting to do a bit of a harsh cut. And I'm going to do the absolute opposite. I'm going to bring down the high threshold as well. So there you go. You can now see everything I'm cutting out is just in the window. Anything that's white is being left alone. Anything that's black is what's being cut out. To go back to my color view, I can just click on the button that now says alpha, or use the drop-down menu to go back to color, and we can see exactly what's cut out and what's been left alone. If I view the media out node again, you'll see, there we go, a much cleaner key. It does raise the second problem though, which is, as I play through this, the foreground clip moves, the background clip doesn't move with it, which isn't really great. That's not what I want. I want it to feel as though these elements are shot at the same time. I want to feel like you're in space. So any sort of camera movement where we're moving around inside the space station, the planet's also going to have to move a little with that. And the way that we're going to do that is just by using a tracker. So if I move this up a little bit, I'm going to select the delta keyer. Again, I'm going to use Shift Space, and I'm just going to type in tracker. And in that tracker, you'll see now in my viewer, it's dropped a tracker in there for me. I'm just going to drag that down and select the edge of the window frame, just somewhere where there's a bit of high contrast. So between that black and the sort of bluish color of the window frame, where there's just that bit of contrast, I'm going to let go. And then just like the planar tracker, I'm going to come up here and I've got my tracking control. So I'm just going to track forward, and you'll see it's tracking that little bit there really quickly, really efficiently. Like the speed of the tracker is super, super helpful. You're not waiting around for ages for tracking. So we've done a track. What do we do now? How do we adjust the position of the planet to move with this? Well, the same way we'd adjust the position of the planet in any way, we'd have to use a transform node. So if I select the planet source here, Shift Space, I'm going to add a transform node. And all I have to do is, with my transform node selected, you know, I showed you the on-screen controls earlier, you know, the arrows and the rotation circle. If I actually right-click on those red arrows, I can choose different parameters. So I'm going to choose the center of this transform node. So remember, we're transforming the planet. So if I set this up, I right click in here, choose transform one center, connect to tracker one, and all these different parameters I can connect it to. If I connect that to tracker one unsteady position and hit play, you'll see now that those are locked together. The only problem is it moves, when it moves in and they are locked together, we start to see the edge of the frame. Easy way around this, if I select my transform node and I just size that up ever so slightly. There we go. Size it up. Now the background moves with our foreground. Really quick, really easy way of working with this. So the last part of this is, that's great. You know, we've done this. We've done our composite, that's great. But what if I want to color correct them slightly differently? What if I want, say, you know, right now it's looking like you're hovering over Earth. What if I wanted it to be like you're hovering over Mars? What if I wanted to add loads of red to the planet without affecting the rest of the image? And it would be, you know, it's perfectly possible to go into the color page and draw a window around that and then just affect that area. But there's a smarter way of doing this, and that starts in the Fusion page. So we've done our green screen composition here. We have our media out node, and I said right at the beginning, the media out node is how we get media out of Fusion into the rest of the application. And media out one is always going to be what feeds, you know, the main part of the color page. It's going to be what feeds back into the edit page. But if I go to the Fusion page, I can add another media out node. If I type in media out, I've added a second media out here. And I'm going to take the output of my tracker, in this case, not the merge. I'm taking the output of my tracker because right now, you know, the planet, everything is going out into this node. if I wanted, I could just take the output of the tracker into my media out to node, because what that does is it gives me basically, 1 second, it just gives me this section. It sends me out just this section as a whole other channel. So now if I go to the color page, again, if I make an adjustment overall here, you see, adjusting offset, I'm changing the whole image. But in the node graph on the color page, if I right click and go to add source, you'll see it adds second source input for me there. So what I'm going to do is I might add 2 parallel nodes here. And you'll see the RGB data from the top source is feeding everything, and that's fine. But I'm going to take the second source, and these blue inputs on the nodes in the color page, those are the alpha inputs. So if I take the second source and drag and drop that, connect them to the alpha inputs, if I highlight them now, you'll see I'm just affecting that part of the image, the same part that's going into that second media out. And that's great. But the problem was I wanted to separate these images out. Right now, I've just got 2 nodes that affect the same thing. So in the color page, if I come down to the key controls for one of them, and I can just invert that using this option here, this map mask option. If I click on that, it then inverts the selection from the previous output. So there we go. I now have my 2 elements split out really easily. So what was that? I said I was going to make the planet a bit more like Mars. So I'm just going to take the offset control. I'm going to push that up towards red. I'm going to pull, as much blue as I can out of that. I want this to be, some sort of fiery hellscape planet. Why not? I might also just, for the sake of it, I might actually say I want my blacks, the black sky to stay black. So I'm just going to use the luminance and saturation curve just to pull any sort of saturation out of the darker parts of the image so that my blacks stay quite clean there. And again, right at the beginning here, I can now brighten just the inside of the spaceship if I wanted to. I could raise the highlights. Again, I might be a bit too far, but there we go. It's a little bit brighter inside the spaceship for us. And again, if I wanted to, if I really wanted to start drawing all these elements together, if I add another serial node here, I used Alt-S to do that. And again, to add all the parallel nodes that I did earlier, you can right click and go to add node that way. I used Alt-S to add that serial node there, and I used Alt-P to add these parallel nodes, or Option rather than Alt if you're on a Mac. So here we go. If I did the same thing, if I added a serial node after the fact, and I just do the same thing, where I'm just taking the alpha input, there we go, that's fine by me, because what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add a little gradient window here, because we've got a really bright light source, this really hot planet outside, but it's not, there's nothing sort of happening on the windowsill here. So I'm making a gradient window under Power Windows and then Gradient. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to add a lot of red in there and just start pushing that in just so around about the window frame starts to go red as well. So that's some really sort of quick basic intro stuff to Fusion. We looked at some basic compositing with the heads up display that we did. Did I save it? Yeah, I saved it, that's good. So we had a look at the basic compositing, like I said, it's almost like Lego, everything stacks on, everything builds on the node in front or the node behind it. We had a look at doing some cleanup when it comes to, the eyes, the scratch on the forehead. We had a look at doing some titles, and now we've had a look at doing some green screen and stuff as well. So that's a really sort of quick overview of the basic functionality of Fusion, trying to demystify a little bit of this and try and make it easier for people to jump into. Like I said at the beginning, it can be quite daunting if you've never worked with a node-based compositor, or you've never worked with any compositor for that matter. It can be a little bit scary to begin with, and it's all about just understanding the basic building blocks of things, you know, where you know, for the cleanup, rather than have to send a shot off to, you know, a VFX artist to do the cleanup. You know, it's quite an easy job for an editor to be able to do now, because you don't have to round trip. You don't have to export an XML or an AEF and import it into another application. You can just jump between the edit page and the Fusion page. Like I said, that's it's one of the biggest advantages to me of Resolve, not having to round trip, not having to send my work off to different applications and get it all to relink and be a bit of an, it's never smooth. I've never had a round trip process that's smooth. So yeah, I hope that's given you some sort of information. If there are any questions, you know, feel free to sort of throw them in chat, and I'll do my best to answer them here and now. You know, I'll give it sort of, you know, 2 or 3 minutes maybe. Don't worry if there aren't any questions. You can always contact us at the Scan Pro Video team. What I will do is I'll put the email address in chat just now. So scanprovideo@scan.co.uk. That's the email address for the Pro Video team. You know, if you have any questions around Resolve or Blackmagic or any kit in general, feel free to email us. You know, get in contact with us. We'll do our best to help answer those. Also, if there's any sort of stuff you want to see from us, you know, we've done sort of every second Thursday of the month, we do a Blackmagic or DaVinci Resolve webinar where we sort of show some, you know, some interesting things. We've done Fusion, we've done Fairlight, we did HDR. I think that was last month. So there's a few things, but if there's any sort of things that you want to see for us in terms of content, if you say, you know, I'd really love to see a video where you talk about the cut page or something like that, let us know, and we'll try and do our best to produce that content for you as well, because we want to make it as educational as possible. I'm not seeing any questions come through, so I'm going to assume that I've answered all the Fusion questions and everyone's now an expert in Fusion. I'm clearly joking, but if that's the case, if no one's got any sort of super in-depth or no one's got any sort of questions or anything like that, I just want to take this opportunity to thank everyone again. I really appreciate your time. I know we ran over quite a bit today, but I really appreciate your time in coming to this webinar. I hope you have, you know, have taken away something helpful. You know, I hope you're not scared to go away and have a play with Fusion now. And I hope you have a good evening and a good rest of the week. Thank you, everyone. I will stop sharing this now and bid you adieu.
For more information on any of the products and solutions mentioned in this webinar, contact the Pro Video team today. And you can also shop our Blackmagic design range at Scan Pro Video. If you haven't checked out our other sessions yet, then head over to the Pro Video YouTube channel and search Blackmagic Design Webinars. Thanks for watching.